The train rolled steadily across the southern English countryside, its iron belly humming with quiet purpose. Inside, the compartment was warm, though the air was tight with unspoken thoughts. An older man, severe in expression, sat beneath his bowler hat. Justice Wargrave, retired, cold-eyed, read the political column of the Times, his lips pressed thin. He judged each article silently, as if the paper itself were on trial. Across from him, a young woman stared out of the window. Vera Claythorne, prim, poised, her gloves folded neatly in her lap. Her reflection drifted in the glass beside passing hedgerows. She blinked often, not from dust, but from memory. Further down, another man, softly to himself. General MacArthur, his cane resting between his knees, let the rhythm of the train guide his thoughts toward the sea and to someone long gone. His uniform was civilian now, but his posture never forgot command. No words passed between them, but the silence was loud. 3 strangers, 3 letters, 3 stories kept quiet under coat buttons and watch chains. The train, as it climbed into Devon's green hills, the sky turning pale and wide. And though none of them knew it yet, this journey led not to a holiday, but to judgment. Narrator. The train curved closer to the coast. Fields flattened into windswept moors, and the sky paled above. Vera Claythorne leaned closer to the glass, her breath leaving faint fog on the pane. Her thoughts drifted, not to the island or the invitation, but to salt water and screams, to a child's hand reaching up, and silence that followed. Her fingers tightened slightly around her handbag. In the seat beside her, Miss Emily Brent sat ramrod straight, back barely touching the seat, Bible clasped in gloved hands. Her eyes did not wander, not to Vera, not to the view. Her mouth pressed inward, disapproving of the motion, the youth, the lack of proper decorum in travel. Narrator softer. The distance between them was no more than a foot, but in feeling, 100 miles. Vera, going far? Emily did not look over. Flatly, Soldier Island. The silence after was longer than necessary. Vera offered a polite smile to the window instead, though it did not quite reach her eyes. Outside, the sea appeared, sudden, gray, vast. The train curved one last time toward its destination. Narrator calming. 2 women, 2 minds wrapped in secrets, one looking forward, afraid, one looking back, ashamed, both unaware that the answers they feared were waiting on a rock surrounded by sea. Narrator. The train sighed to a stop at the sleepy harbor village of Sticklehaven. The sky above was milky with cloud. Gulls cried above narrow cobbled streets. And there at the water's edge, a small motor launch bobbed gently beside the quay. 10 names, 10 arrivals. Mr. Bloor arrived last, mustache freshly combed. Stepping from a hired cab, his eyes darted quickly, marking exits, judging distance. Though he gave the name Davis, his suitcase bore another set of initials. Nearby, Philip Lombard lit a cigarette with practiced calm, hands steady despite the breeze. A man used to travel and danger. Dr. Armstrong checked his watch for the 3rd time, adjusting his coat collar as the sea air bit through his city skin. His eyes, however, were less on the weather and more on the others, especially Wargrave, who stood apart, posture precise as always. 10 people had come to this shore by different roads, but now the paths narrowed, leading only to the sea. Fred Narracott, local boatman, waited beside the launch. His expression, thin-lipped and wary, flicked from face to face. He didn't like this crowd. And the wind was picking up. The boat puttered across the choppy water, leaving the comfort of the coast behind. Waves slapped its sides with briny hands. And then, Soldier Island appeared. It rose abruptly from the sea, like a giant skull. There, rock, wind-bent grass, and at the crown, a modern house of glass and granite, strange against the landscape. Cold, clean, watching. Vera leaned forward, hair catching in the breeze. "It's very bare," she whispered. Lombard grinning. "Perfect place for secrets." Armstrong, shivering, though not from cold. The island seemed to repel sound. Even the boat's motor felt muffled in its shadow. The other guests sat in silence, eyes drawn to the imposing house ahead, its windows catching light like staring eyes. Narrator, low, slow. The island was neither welcoming nor wild. It was waiting. Narrator. The boat docked. A narrow stone path twisted up to the house, where two figures stood, silhouetted against the open doorway. Mr. and Mrs. Rogers. He was tall, thin, face drawn like ink on wet paper. She was paler still, eyes downcast, hands wringing the hem of her apron. "Welcome to Soldier Island," Mr. Rogers said, voice polished but distant. The guest stepped inside. Cool marble underfoot, walls painted white. The entrance hall stretched wide and tall, with modern paintings and cold lamps. No warmth, only symmetry. Narrator, soft, uneasy. The house was a shell, polished, empty, echoing with footsteps. Mrs. Rogers showed Vera to her room. "Dinner at 8, she murmured, barely audible. Her hands shook as she set down the towel. Vera hesitated. Are you and your husband the only staff here?" A pause. "Yes, miss. Just us." And then the door closed quietly behind her. Narrator. The drawing room filled slowly. Outside, the waves kept whispering against the island rocks, but inside, the fire crackled, more for show than warmth. Vera stood beside a bookshelf, pretending to read titles. Nearby, Bloor poured himself a stiff drink, keeping his accent carefully South African as he'd rehearsed. Dr. Armstrong settled into a high-backed chair, his fingers drumming quietly on the armrest. General MacArthur leaned near the fireplace, lost in flame and memory. Emily Brent sat in a corner, upright and disapproving. Lombard moved freely, easy among strangers, drink in hand. Casual. "Looks like quite the gathering," he said, to no one in particular. Wargrave stood last to arrive, peering over the rim of his glasses before choosing a chair near the center. No one mentioned the host's absence. No one mentioned the silence that grew heavier with every tick of the clock. It was the calm before the first question, the hush before the curtain lifts. Each guest a mask, and behind it, something darker. At precisely 8, they gathered around the long dining table. 10 chairs, 10 plates, and polished silver catching the flicker of candlelight. Mr. Rogers served roast beef and potatoes. The guests made polite remarks, knives clinking softly. Vera found herself seated between Lombard and Dr. Armstrong. She smiled at their small talk, but ate little. Emily Brent offered no conversation, her eyes judging each word spoken around her. General MacArthur talked of the sea, of naval postings, of storms past. His voice echoed faintly off the clean white walls. Bloor, still pretending to be Davis, nodded too much. Lombard. Odd, isn't it? A house this fine, and we've never met our host. Silence met his words. Wargrave dabbed his mouth with a napkin and looked at no one. Narrator, slower, cooler. The food was warm, the air cold. And somewhere between the two, suspicion began to rise. Narrator. Dinner ended. Guests moved back into the drawing room, their steps echoing on polished floors. Mr. Rogers stepped forward. "If you will allow me, ladies and gentlemen, a message was left for me. I've been asked to play this." He placed a black record on a gramophone in the corner. The needle dropped, a hiss. a crackle, and then a voice. Cold, male, unfamiliar. Voice. Recorded. Ladies and gentlemen, you are charged with the following crimes. One by one, names were read. Accusations followed, deaths, incidents, secrets. Vera gasped, dropping her glass. Bloor stiffened, caught in his lie. Armstrong turned pale. MacArthur's mouth fell open. Mrs. Rogers swayed. Wargrave sat motionless, hands folded. Emily Brent turned her eyes to the ceiling. Narrator, low, dramatic. No one moved. The needle scratched forward. The record ended, but the echo of its voice stayed behind.
Narrator, chaos stirred quietly, like a serpent beneath the carpet. Bloor was first.
That's slander, he snapped. I've never been to Landor.
Armstrong ran a hand across his forehead.
I was acquitted. It was years ago.
Vera couldn't speak. Her lips trembled. She stared at the empty fireplace. Emily Brent raised her eyebrows, haughtily.
I refuse to dignify such nonsense with a response.
MacArthur lowered himself slowly into a chair, thoughtful. So it comes for us all, eh? Mr. and Mrs. Rogers stood in the corner. She was shaking. He looked like he might vanish into the wall. Lombard tilted his glass. Quite the evening's entertainment, he said, though his eyes betrayed the line. Wargrave's voice rose like steel, firmly. This cannot be coincidence. We have been brought here under false pretenses. Narrator, cool and slow. Each denial, each excuse, wrapped tighter around them like ropes they knotted themselves.
The guests dispersed, carried off by their own thoughts. Rain tapped at the windows. The fire burned lower. Upstairs, Vera opened her suitcase with trembling fingers. A faint trace of sea salt still clung to her skin. She paused before the mirror, unsure of the reflection staring back. MacArthur stared out his bedroom window. The sea was endless. He wondered if ghosts could cross water. Bloor locked his door. Twice. Emily Brent knelt beside her bed, praying in silence. But her eyes stayed open. Armstrong poured a small measure of brandy. The glass rattled against his teeth. Rogers prepared the rooms in silence. Mrs. Rogers had gone to bed early, pale as wax. Softer, calming. Only the waves spoke. The island was still, but the house had heard too much. And the night, now, would not sleep. Morning light crept over the island, pale, reluctant. It revealed a house not yet awake, and minds that had barely slept. In the drawing room, silence returned, but now it crackled with something brittle. Justice Wargrave sat at the breakfast table, untouched tea beside him. His gaze lingered on the wallpaper, as if he could read guilt in the pattern. Dr. Armstrong entered, hair uncombed, fingers twitching. He avoided Wargrave's eyes. Vera stood at the window, arms crossed tight. Her reflection stared back, accusing and silent. Bloor, ever the performer, adjusted his tie, and that record was a hoax. Must have been, he said, too loudly. No one answered. It was too early for shouting. Too soon for lies. Some truths had been spoken aloud last night, and some, still curled beneath coats, behind eyelids, waiting. Mr. Rogers polished the silver. His hands shook, though he tried to hide it. Armstrong approached him in the kitchen. "Who gave you that record?" he asked, softly but firmly. "I swear, sir," Rogers said, eyes wide. "It were left in a sealed envelope. Instructions said to play it after dinner." Behind them, Wargrave entered, quiet as thought. "You were not told who Mr. Owen was?" "No, sir." Mrs. Rogers hovered near the pantry door, pale as flour. She flinched when Wargrave spoke. Determined. "We'll get to the bottom of this," Wargrave said. "Eventually." But Armstrong frowned, annoyed. "What's the delay then?" Rogers straightened his back. "Breakfast is late, sir. Mrs. Rogers isn't feeling well." In a house full of secrets, the hired help suddenly seemed the most honest and the most afraid.
The house held no secrets, at least none it wanted to share. Bloor, Lombard, and Armstrong searched from attic to cellar. The others listened to their footsteps crossing ceilings and disappearing down halls. Behind every door, nothing. No Mr. Owen, no extra rooms, just stillness. They regrouped near the staircase. "Empty," Lombard said, hands on hips. "Unless he's hiding in a picture frame." Bloor tapped the wall panels, listening for hollow sounds. "He's not here." Armstrong leaned against the banister. "Then who's running the game?" Narrator, calmly, distantly. The house seemed to breathe around them. Softly, the house seemed to breathe around them. Sighs, quiet sighs. From behind closed doors, the groan of old wood shifting, as though it too waited for answers. In the drawing room, Vera sat, curled in a chair, knees together, fingers fidgeting with a loose thread in her skirt. Emily Brent embroidered steadily, deliberately, the needle slipping through linen like a metronome. From upstairs, Rogers's footsteps descended. "No one's found, madam," he said gently. "The island appears quite empty." Vera looked up, surprised. "And the boat?" "Won't return till Monday, miss." Emily didn't pause her stitching. "Then we are prisoners of our own foolish decisions." The house offered no answers, but the silence, that at least, was honest. Narrator. Later, the guests gathered again in the lounge. No one smiled. No one offered tea. Justice Wargrave stood before the hearth. Thoughtful. "Let's assess the situation logically." Lombard shrugs. "We're 10 strangers summoned under aliases by someone not here." Emily Brent looked up sharply, annoyed. "I accepted an invitation from Miss Oliver." Bloor grunts. "And I'm sure she exists, like Mr. Owen." Dr. Armstrong stepped in. Thoughtful. "This seems orchestrated. Psychological manipulation. Guilt, shame, isolation." Vera whispers. "But why us?" No one answered. General MacArthur stared through the window, his voice a whisper. "None of us will leave this place." His words hung longer than the others, as if he already knew something they hadn't realized yet. Narrator. Justice Wargrave. Determined. If we are to survive this absurd scenario, we must act with reason, not fear. He assigned tasks, search teams, logbooks, routine. Bloor kept records. Lombard inspected windows. Armstrong ensured no one was ill. Vera, arms crossed, remained skeptical. Skeptical. Routine won't save us from what's out there. Or what's in here, added Armstrong, voice low. Emily Brent refused any orders. Firmly, "I serve no man but God." Still, Wargrave's voice held power. Even fear bowed to it. For now. Narrator, softly. Order returned to the house, but just on the surface. Beneath it, something stirred. That evening, footsteps echoed quietly upstairs. Doors closed with care, as if each guest feared waking the house itself. In her room, Vera brushed her hair slowly. Her eyes lingered on the framed nursery rhyme.
10 little soldier boys went out to dine.
Down the hall, Bloor stacked furniture against his door. Emily Brent read scripture beneath lamplight. Her lips moved silently, stern and steady. General MacArthur sat on the edge of his bed staring at nothing. The lines in his face had grown deeper. Armstrong checked and rechecked the medicine case. Something wasn't right. Soldier Island was quiet, but no one truly rested. MacArthur couldn't sleep. He wandered outside, drawn to the sea's rhythmic pool. The night air was cool, the waves below hissed against black rock. He thought of Richmond, Arthur Richmond, young and sure and dead. A decision made under orders, and under jealousy. He had never spoken of it, not to his wife, not even to himself, until now. Vera found him later leaning on the stone wall. "I don't think any of us will leave this island," he said gently. She said nothing. Some truths are too old to fear, some too quiet to forget. Inside, the house breathed, a creak on the stairs. Mrs. Rogers moved like a ghost, carrying fresh towels. Her face was drawn, eyes wide in the low light. She paused. Something moved ahead, or was it shadow? She turned. No one. From a hallway above, Blore watched. His breath caught, fist closing. In Soldier Island's house, even silence had weight, and every shadow asked questions.
Narrator. Emily Brent sat before the mirror, her Bible closed. She was remembering, though she would never call it guilt. A girl, young, unmarried, turned out of her house for sin. The girl had drowned. Emily had prayed for her soul. That was enough. The house groaned softly behind her. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached for her hairbrush and smoothed back silver strands. "God sees all," she murmured. Narrator. Low, slow. But perhaps on Soldier Island, he had company. Narrator. As sleep settled, uneasy, uneven, one by one the guests glanced at the wall. In every room, framed neatly above the bed, 10 little soldier boys went out to dine. Each guest had read it, each had wondered. One soldier boy choked his little self, and then there were 9. Vera blinked at it in the dark. Armstrong whispered the lines aloud, like a curse. Brent ignored it, but not really. MacArthur stared at nothing, the rhythm echoing in his head. Blore hummed the tune unconsciously. Even Wargrave, alone in his room, closed his eyes with the rhyme still playing softly in the silence. Narrator whispered, the rhyme waited, and the island did not sleep. Morning brought gray skies and breakfast smells drifting from the kitchen. Anthony Marston was the first to descend, fresh, bright-eyed, amused. He poured himself a stiff drink, even before tea. Vera wrinkled her nose. "Isn't it a bit early?" Marston grinned. "Nothing wrong with a morning tonic." They gathered slowly. Wargrave read the paper. Armstrong sipped coffee. Blore watched everyone with twitchy eyes. Then, Marston stiffened. Glass halfway to his lips. His mouth opened. No sound. The glass dropped. He collapsed. Shattered glass. Silence. Then, screams! Armstrong leapt forward, knelt, checked for a pulse. Wargrave stood slowly, thoughtful. "He's dead?" Armstrong nodded. Solemn. "Cyanide. Quick." Mrs. Rogers fainted. Narrator slowly. One gone. And the rhyme had begun. In the dining room, 10 small china figures once stood on the mantel. Now, only 9. Mr. Rogers noticed it first. He stared at the gap, jaw trembling. Vera entered behind him, surprised. "Where's the 10th?" They looked at each other, said nothing. At breakfast, the others joined. They pretended to eat. Eyes flicked to chairs, then back to plates. Emily Brent sipped tea, quietly. "Suicide," she said. "No," Armstrong muttered. "Not suicide." Lombard leaned back, relaxed. "Then we know what we're dealing with." Wargrave's gaze drifted to the mantel. Narrator softer. 9 figures. 9 guests. Morning brought gray skies and breakfast smells drifting from the kitchen. Anthony Marston was the first to descend, fresh, bright-eyed, amused. He poured himself a stiff drink, even before tea. Vera wrinkled her nose. "Isn't it a bit early?" Marston grinned. "Nothing wrong with a morning tonic." They gathered slowly. Wargrave read the paper. Armstrong sipped coffee. Bloor watched everyone with twitchy eyes. Then, Marston stiffened. Glass halfway to his lips. His mouth opened. No sound. The glass dropped. He collapsed. Shattered glass. Silence. Then, screams! Armstrong leapt forward, knelt, checked for a pulse. Wargrave stood slowly, thoughtful. "He's dead?" Armstrong nodded. Solemn. "Cyanide. Quick." Mrs. Rogers fainted. Narrator slowly. One gone. And the rhyme had begun. In the dining room, 10 small china figures once stood on the mantel. Now, only 9. Mr. Rogers noticed it first. He stared at the gap, jaw trembling. Vera entered behind him, surprised. "Where's the 10th?" They looked at each other, said nothing. At breakfast, the others joined. They pretended to eat. Eyes flicked to chairs, then back to plates. Emily Brent sipped tea, quietly. "Suicide," she said. "No," Armstrong muttered. "Not suicide." Lombard leaned back, relaxed. "Then we know what we're dealing with." Wargrave's gaze drifted to the mantel. Narrator softer. 9 figures. 9 guests. In the drawing room, voices began to rise. Lombard paced. "There's a killer among us." Emily Brent scoffed. "Or perhaps God's will." Bloor snapped. "Don't talk rubbish." Armstrong raised both hands. "We don't know enough. It could still be someone on the island." "There's no one else," said Wargrave. "We searched thoroughly." Vera shivered. "Then who?" Eyes darted. No one met her gaze. General MacArthur spoke softly. "Perhaps we deserve this." The room fell still. Blame is loud, but fear is louder. The meal was simple. Bread, butter, tea, but no one tasted it. Mrs. Rogers barely moved. Her hands trembled, pouring milk. "Are you feeling well?" Vera asked gently. I didn't sleep," the woman whispered. "Bad dreams." Armstrong hovered nearby. "You must rest." Emily Brent didn't look up. "Weakness is unbecoming." Rogers cleared the plates, his movements mechanical. Every clink of silver felt like a countdown. Narrator. Later, by the cliffs, Vera found General MacArthur staring into the sea. "The waiting is the worst," he said. She didn't speak. "I sent him to die," he continued, voice steady. "Richmond, young, trusting." Vera's breath caught. "I knew what I was doing," he added. "I wanted him gone." She stepped back. "Now I wait, and I know I won't leave this place." He turned to her, smile calm, almost kind. "I suppose it's only fair." Narrator. In her room, Emily Brent opened her journal. She wrote with slow, careful strokes. "Be sure your sin will find you out." The room was silent, but for the ticking clock. Her mind drifted. To the girl, Beatrice, a scandal, a sin, and then the river. She had done what was right. The girl had suffered the consequence. Still, Brent's fingers trembled just slightly. She closed the book. Narrator, softly.
Some sins confess themselves, even when the pen denies it. Narrator. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the floorboards. One by one, the guests drifted to their rooms. Doors closed gently. Locks clicked softly. Vera stood by her window, watching dusk settle on the sea. Blore lit a candle, his face tense. Wargrave sat fully dressed, as if waiting for something, or someone. Mrs. Rogers was already in bed. Too still.
Narrator. Morning came, and Mrs. Rogers didn't rise. Rogers knocked once, then again. No answer. Inside, she lay still, eyes closed, paler than before. Armstrong was called. He checked her pulse, shook his head. Sad. She's gone. Rogers stared, frozen. I gave her something to sleep, Armstrong whispered. Only a sedative. No one spoke, but they all looked at him. Narrator. 2 bodies, 2 broken names. The dining room mantel showed only 8 soldier figures now. Rogers didn't speak as he cleared breakfast. His eyes never lifted. Emily Brent folded her hands. Solemnly, "The wages of sin," she said. No one corrected her. Blore watched Armstrong from across the table, and Vera stared at the rhyme. 2 little soldier boys. Narrator. Softly, and then there were 8. Rain began in the afternoon, heavy, relentless. Thunder murmured in the distance. The house grew darker. Lamps flickered. Blore checked the windows. Locked. Lombard tested the doors. Still bolted. Armstrong sat in the drawing room, his hands shaking again. Vera refused to leave the fire. "Oh, I don't want to be alone," she whispered. No one argued. Narrator. Slower. The storm wasn't outside. It had already arrived. Narrator. The storm had not eased. Wind clawed at the glass, and waves pounded the island's edge like fists. Breakfast was quiet. Vera stirred her tea without drinking. MacArthur didn't come down. His chair remained empty. Wargrave looked at it, but said nothing. Rogers spoke softly. "The boat should have come by now." No one replied. Dr. Armstrong stared out the window. Narrator. Softly. 3 chairs, 3 names, gone. And still, no boat came. Narrator. By late morning, the storm only worsened. But one name remained missing from the head count. MacArthur. Lombard and Blore went searching. Hallways, guest rooms, even the cellar. Nothing. Then Vera, standing near the drawing room window, pointed, surprised. There! Down on the stone patio near the edge of the cliffs, the general sat, perfectly still. They rushed outside. Armstrong bent beside him, fingers pressed to the cold neck. Somber. No pulse. Wargrave's voice was low, gravelly. Another. Narrator. Back inside, they counted. The figures on the mantel. 7. Marston. Mrs. Rogers. MacArthur. Gone. In turn. Vera stepped back, whispering, "It's following the rhyme." Wargrave nodded. Thoughtful. Exactly. Armstrong's hands trembled. Nervously. "This is impossible." Emily Brent whispered,
Ominous or ordained. Lombard turned to the others. Urgent. We're being hunted. No one disagreed.
Later, Roger set the table for dinner. 7 places. He moved slowly, eyes never leaving the plates. Vera entered, watched him quietly. "You don't have to," she said. Rogers didn't answer. He unfolded a napkin with precise care. "I do," he whispered. "It's all I know to do." She nodded. Behind them, thunder rolled across the sky. In the drawing room, Emily Brent sat with her Bible. She spoke quietly to Vera. "That poor girl, the one I dismissed. It was her own sin that damned her." Vera looked away. "You feel no guilt?" Firmly. "None. I did my duty." Vera's lips parted, but no words came. Narrator, softly. "Some sins hide behind scripture, and some hide behind silence." Lombard spread a map of the island on the table. "There's nowhere to hide," he said. "We've searched it all. There's no one else here." Blore crossed his arms. "Unless someone's sneaking among us." Armstrong swallowed, nervously. "Then it's one of us." A pause. Wargrave's voice was quiet, thoughtful. "That seems inevitable." The fire popped in the silence. That night, Emily Brent sat alone in her room. Rain tapped the windows. The wind howled like a voice. And then, she saw her. A girl, pale, soaked, standing in the corner. Emily didn't move. Her breath hitched. The figure was gone. Was it a dream? A memory? She didn't know. She turned back to her Bible. Some ghosts never knock. They just arrive. Narrator. Dr. Armstrong sat in the study. He uncapped a bottle of brandy. Hands shook.
I prescribed her something mild.
He whispered.
Nothing dangerous.
His eyes blurred.
Did I make a mistake?
No one answered. Only the storm. Narrator. Sometimes guilt arrives before the truth. Narrator. Night deepened. Blore confronted Lombard in the hall. "You brought a gun!" Lombard smirked. "Wouldn't you? You plan to use it? If necessary." The thunder cracked, drowning the silence between them. Neither moved. Narrator. Even the rain knew what was coming. Vera dreamed of water, salt, cold, pulling her down. A boy's laughter, then a scream. She woke, gasping. The room was quiet, but her heart pounded. She turned to the wall. The rhyme hung there. 8 little soldier boys. She stared until her eyes blurred. Narrator. Morning would come, but not mercy. The storm clung to the island like a second skin. The rain hadn't stopped. Not for hours. The windows wept. The wind howled. In the kitchen, Rogers moved quietly, preparing breakfast for a table he feared. His hands shook. His eyes darted toward shadows. The coffee pot clattered against the stovetop. Armstrong entered. "Let me help." Rogers nodded, grateful, afraid to speak. Some silences are heavier than sound. When breakfast was served, the table had changed again. Only 6 soldier figures stood now. No one spoke. Rogers stood by the door, pale. Vera, whispering, "They're vanishing with us." Wargrave glanced at her. Exactly. As the rhyme says. No one ate. The food remained warm, untouched. Outside, the sea raged. Inside, fear simmered beneath quiet eyes. By the window, Vera stood wrapped in a shawl, watching waves slam the rocks. Lombard approached. "This island's a trap," he said quietly. Vera turned. I feel like a mouse in some experiment. He nodded. Someone is watching, waiting. Vera whispering, Do you think we'll live? Lombard didn't answer. The wind outside howled in reply. Lunchtime came. No Rogers. Vera found the teapot cold. Anxiously, Where is he? She asked. They searched the house, then the woodshed. Inside, Rogers lay still, axe nearby, blood on stone. Dr. Armstrong dropped to his knees. But it was too late. Another gone. Another verse fulfilled.
Vera stood in the hallway, breath short. She leaned against the wall, eyes wide, heart racing. A boy's laughter echoed in her mind, then water, then silence. She clutched the locket at her neck. I saved him, she whispered. I tried. But the rhyme waited in every room, and guilt didn't sleep. Blore double-checked the locks, every window, every door. All sealed, he said. Armstrong frowned. Then the killer is one of us? Lombard leaned on the railing. And we all have a reason. Silence. Even the storm seemed to hush. The house was locked, but no one felt safe. Emily Brent sat upright in the parlor. She didn't blink. She saw the girl again, Beatrice, standing in water, eyes wide, reaching. Emily didn't move. The clock ticked once, twice, then she whispered, "Repent," and the figure vanished. That evening, Wargrave requested Armstrong join him by the fire. They sat opposite, in silence. Then Wargrave said, "You suspect me." Armstrong said nothing. "And yet here you sit." Armstrong finally spoke. "We all have reason," Wargrave nodded. "Including you." The fire cracked. In a room full of whispers, truth speaks last. The next morning, Emily Brent did not come down. They knocked. No answer. Inside, she sat upright in her chair, Bible on her lap, eyes closed. Still. Armstrong checked her wrist.
She's gone.
A hypodermic lay nearby.
Poison,
he said. Vera backed away.
She saw something. She said things.
No one spoke. The rhyme had moved again. The soldier figures, 5. The guests, 5. They stared at one another. Vera, Lombard, Armstrong, Blore, Wargrave. No one trusted. No one rested. They sat together, but apart. The storm outside had quieted, but inside, the air crackled with dread, and the island listened.